From backyard Barbies to volunteer halls, you can hear that spirit in the weekend calls. Doesn't take gold, just a soul that cares. They're doing good stuff everywhere.
Yes, we have a segment called Doing Good Stuff, and what we do is we find people who are doing good stuff and we talk to them. And one such person manages a website that I've used quite a bit over the journey. I think there are some of you out there who think I'm actually quite clever, but really I'm not. I just go and find websites. And one such website is called The History of Australian Music from 1960 until 2000. The founder and I guess curator of that is a gentleman called Kim Challands. G'day, Kim.
G'day, mate. How you going?
Doing all right, thank you. You've got Neil here. You've already spoken to Robbie's just ducked out of the studio for a moment to welcome a guest for the next show. But thanks for joining us. I guess it's pretty obvious from the name what the history of Australian music from 1960 to 2000 is.
Yep.
So it's a website. Tell us about why you decided to set it up and the amount of work that goes into it and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, back in 2013... I bought a book, David Kent's chart book.
Oh, the green cover.
Absolutely brilliant book.
Yeah.
And I was going through the books, and there was a lot of chart entries in there, so I decided to check the chart entry against the name. And then suddenly I'm thinking to myself, there's no information on these people. So Wikipedia in those days had all the big bands and all the big artists from Australia, but they didn't have anybody like, for example, the Showman, who had a couple of records released on Festival Records, and there was a heap of them that were released on major labels that never made it onto the airways. One, because I think the DJs didn't like it, or it wasn't commercial enough, or whatever. And then I thought, these people need to get some recognition. So I just started it, and it became a labour of love, and then my knowledge just expanded exponentially, and now I got right into it. I really dug some of the entries that I put in, because a lot of these guys went on to bigger and bigger bands, and they just started out in little bands, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the other things too that I'm going to go out on a limb here, Kim, and suggest that not everything on Wikipedia is accurate, because it's thrown together by people who don't know what they're talking about quite frequently. You clearly have two things going for you. One is that you know what you're talking about, and two, you've got an absolute passion for getting it right.
Well, when I started delving into Wikipedia, there was a lot of misinformation on there, and then I started listening to interviews by the band members, and one particular interview I remember clearly was Peter McKetty from the group, stating that Wikipedia was totally wrong. So I went back to Wikipedia, had a look at it, and then I listened to Peter's rant, for want of a better word, on an interview, and I just wrote down everything he said, because, when you get it out of the horse's mouth, it's bloody correct.
Oh, we hope so. Yeah. But, I guess we if you say to people, name a whole lot of Australian artists, they're going to go Jimmy Barnes, Marsha Hines, the usuals. But there are so many of these bands. Like I'll drop the name if you want to bend down and pick it up. I was talking to Andrew Farris from In Excess on Thursday morning, and we were talking about the days in Melbourne where you get these little bands coming out of Sydney that no one had ever heard of, playing at about 12 or 15 pubs in Melbourne on 2 weeks stint, and some of them went on to become Metal as Anything and In Excess. Others just disappeared.
Yeah, that's right, mate. And what I said was, a lot of these band members, they started in these obscure bands playing in pubs, and then joined something bigger and went on to something huge. For example, like Gus and the Nomads from the 60s, right? Mm-hmm. Eventually became Piranha, who played at Sunbury. And, there's a million of those types of stories. It's just brilliant.
Hey, Kim, on that theme, you've found heaps of stuff which I guess has made you go, oh, geez, that's interesting. But have you found a few things that have really made your eyes pop?
Well, No, not really. No, I could, off the top of my head, I can't say. But look, I've spent hours and hours going through Women's Weekly, Trove, the net, YouTube, and some of these people are really, really hard to track down. And it just takes hours and hours of research, and sometimes you never find it anyway. So, yeah, but nothing really, really sticks out, no.
Rob spends a lot of time going through the Women's Weekly as well. Doesn't know anything about music, but you should see his fruitcake.
Oh, yeah. I can make a mean fruitcake, Kim.
Because a really good example of that, I guess, for people playing along at home, there's a band who were mildly successful called Little River Band. There was also a band called Mississippi. There was also a band called Drummond, and there was also a band called Alison Gross, all of which were fundamentally the same band, plus or minus Glenn Shorrock.
Yeah, pretty much. And before Alison Gross, there was Travis Wellington Hedge that Graham Goble came out of, and then obviously did Alison Gross, and then on to Mississippi.
He knows his stuff, Rob. He's good.
But you'll find a lot. You'll find a lot of that sort of family tree with people that go on to, like huge success. I'll give you one example. Kevin Peake, who played with Johnny Broom and the Handles in the 60s, right?
Mm-hmm.
The guy, one of the English promoters came out here, saw them, took them to England. They came back, and then they became the James Taylor Mood, which released one of the best songs of the 60s called Magic Eyes. And then Kevin Peake went back to the UK and formed Sky with John Williams, and how big they were.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, there's just one example.
Yeah. There was a radio program that used to be on in Melbourne and 94.1 FM 3WBC where I've done a bit of work in the past, and that was done by a guy called Gavin Carroll. And he's played bass with just about everybody in Australia. He's one of those guys that you never heard of, but he's played with everybody. And one show, he did a show, he used to do a 2-hour show on a Sunday afternoon. He did one show where he started off playing a song, I can't remember what it was. He got through 2 shows. Every song was linked by someone being in the previous band.
That's fabulous.
It was just extraordinary. 4 hours of music. Now, there was a couple that he went back to, but along the way. But even still, that sort of stuff is mind-boggling. I guess it's to do with the fact that the Australian music industry is relatively small compared with other places.
Yep, it is small for sure. But there's still a lot of people that, played with one band and were never heard of again, and they just disappeared into the ether. They had their 5 minutes of fame or not, and then they just disappeared. They had apprenticeships to do, or they were tradies or something else, and just never went back to the music industry.
Well, one of my favourite ones of those is a lady called Margaret McLaren. Is that a name you recognise?
Yes, I do know Margaret. Unfortunately, Margaret died last year or the year before.
Oh, that's sad. We interviewed her 2 or 3 years ago, and she went on to a career in corporate project management.
Really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and we interviewed her. It's on our website if you want to go back and have a listen. And she said she staggered everybody at the Christmas party by standing up and saying, because I had the #1 hit with Johnny O'Keefe. I was, yeah, sure. And she got up and sang. I'm very sad to hear about Margaret because she was a good chat. And, I guess there's those stories scattered everywhere, aren't they?
Yeah, there's heaps of those type of stories, mate, yeah.
Well,
and when they leave the music industry, you sort of lose trail.
Yeah, yeah.
And when they go on to do different things, you sort of lose a trail on them. You don't know what they're doing. But the beautiful thing about my blog is that I've got a comment section, and so I have a stack of people come in and say, this is what they're doing now, this is where they lived, this is what they died in this particular year. So I'm very fortunate. Or he was my dad and I loved him, and, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it was fantastic like that.
Well, it's called The History of Australian Music from 1960 to 2000. How can people find it, Kim?
Just go to the webpage, which is historyofaussiemusic.blogspot.com.au.
History of Aussie Music, not Australian. History of AussieMusic.blogspot.com, yeah?
.au.
Okay. All power to you. You're doing really good stuff, because without it, well, I wouldn't sound half as knowledgeable as I sound on the radio on a Saturday morning. And you're about to kick off a radio career yourself up at EMFM in Echuca. What's the show going to be about?
It's going to be a history of Aussie music, and I'll be playing songs from the 60s and 70s that are obscure were released on singles but never made it to the airways. And I'm also doing regional country bands from the 60s that never saw the light of day. And, some of these bands released incredible music. And it's a travesty that these singles were never played.
Well, we are fortunate we've got you looking after it. Thanks for joining us on Two Blokes Chatting Radio Show, Kim, and all power to you.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Good on you. All the best. There it is. That is Kim Challands from the History of Australian Music from 1960 to 2000. It's a website that you can find by going to historyofaussiemusic.com. Blogspot.com.au.